Okay, friends, welcome back to the ecoChristian podcast. I'm your host, Caleb Cray Haynes, and we're exploring what it means to be Christian on planet Earth. And I'm so glad to be back here in the room with you all and having these conversations together. Friends, there's so many things that we just need to wrestle with as the people of God around ecological concerns and being a people of this planet and what it means to be good stewards. And yes, all the things, and as always, the things that the people who continually bring me joy are the children around us. And one of the funny things recently. So we've spent a lot of effort and energy and bandwidth up front teaching our children, or trying to at least teach our children good theology and the stories of the Bible and the overarching story of the Bible, and which is fairly backwards from I feel like how many of us grew up in the church, where we first learned the books of the Bible, the creedal statements, the do's and the don'ts, and all that, and so we've just been doing it backwards, I suppose. But so just recently, we've been sort of double downing on just some of those basic things that we may have grown up learning first, and so I've been going through with the kids at church the books of the Bible. And I'm like, did we ever have these memorized at one point? Because there's some ones in there that you just forget are in there, like Obadiah, and there's some deep Old Testament books that we just don't spend enough time on, to be honest. But they're all good. But so we've been trying to work with our kids and more of just kind of, it's probably good as little Christians to have a better understanding of the placement of these books in the Bible and the more contextual setting and stuff like that. But so we've been really slowing it down this last Sunday of just like, I'm like, okay, guys, just the first 5. And we end up going through the first 5. And it's just so funny because these kids can tell you about all of these Old Testament stories and characters, and they just wrestle with just some of the most meaningful theological questions that some adults don't even get into. But they've literally never heard the word Leviticus before, and so it's just a good time. So we're learning about the Pentateuch and how that our Jewish friends would call this the law, right? And these first 5 books of the Bible, and then we turn around and read the verse, right, of what you and I, or maybe you and I, grew up learning, the golden rule: treat others as you would want to be treated. And Jesus says, "For this sums up the law and the prophets." And you're like, oh, that's what that means. And right, we're referring to these first 5 books of the Bible. We're referring to the Torah in the New Testament. We're talking about the law. And one of my little buddies in the room was like, "Man, I always thought that was just like the legal system today." And anyway, it's just the kids are just the endless source of joy around here. But let's be honest, they also scream a lot, so let's not romanticize this. But yes, so it's been really great to be around our kids here at church lately, as I've been out of town a good bit and doing some traveling. And so some of you know, maybe, I don't know if I've shared this on here or not, but I'm honored to be able to be a part of the board of directors of Creation Justice Ministries, which I know I plug a lot of their resources here in the show. And so last week we held our annual meeting, in-person meeting in Phoenix, Arizona. And I spent very little time in Phoenix, but one of the reasons we were there was in order to connect and support and be in solidarity with local indigenous efforts of protecting Oak Flat. Now, you may have seen the name Oak Flat in the news recently, perhaps, but it's a sacred site to several indigenous tribes, including the San Carlos Apache Tribe there in the area, whose very culture and way of life and religious ceremony and food and the oaks and the acorns, everything springs from this place that is sacred ground for them. They just have such a wonderful sense of placeness around who they are and in the world. But this place and these people, right, they already embody a history full of hardship and colonization, as many tribes were forced together around this territory in the late 1800s. Yet they have, through all this, been able to sustain their worship and their way of life. But today, right now, this sacred place of Oak Flat is more vulnerable than ever, as greedy hands have clawed closer and closer at the deposits of copper located underneath the ground there in Oak Flat. So Oak Flat is under great threat by this company called Resolution Copper, which is, I'm going to do air quotes, is a made-up company just for this job from larger conglomerates out of the UK and Australia that have created this mining company, Resolution Copper, and they're seeking to come here and extract copper from this land, in which will likely be sold back to China for refinery, and then maybe resold at some later time here to American industry. But they're trying to push through this block cave mining that would totally devastate this precious land and this sacred site, leaving behind a crater the size of more than 31 football fields, like 1.8 miles across, just ruining the water table for this part of Arizona, which is already in a mega drought and has been ongoing, and decimating a way of life that has existed for this people in this land just for so long. And so, last week we had the honor to be a part of a march to the courthouse in Phoenix, and a peaceful prayer vigil where we held prayers and heard spoken words and sang songs to raise the voices of those whose voices have gone unheard for so much of American history here.
Our ceremonies, our language are intertwined with the earth. Without the earth, without the water, without the plants, without the emery oak that they say that they're going to destroy first when the land transfer goes through, will mean the start to the end of our people. Our people have been able to remain and stay resilient to their identity and who they are since the time colonization has started. We went through prison, under reservations. We went through the boarding school where they took away our children from their families, forcing them to take away the savage Indian in them, to follow the tactics of kill the Indian, save the man, because they knew that they couldn't exterminate our people. They took and forced our women and our men off during the relocation era from the reservation and our families, forcing away our culture. But we still remained because we knew in our hearts that the land was still there. We knew that in our hearts that our sacred sites and ceremonies were still there, like places like Chichil-Beshagot-El.
That's Nayland Pike of the San Carlos Apache Tribe. It was just such a powerful moment there. This is a land-based religion. They can't just go down the street and continue with their worship and way of life. Like, imagine today that our government gave some out of the country, some European mining operation, the green light to destroy your place of worship, your house of worship, maybe that's your church building or grounds or facility, in order to extract minerals underneath it. I mean, this is absurd. Deeper still, this is a religious freedom case, right? This is something we should all be paying attention to. Oak Flat for the San Carlos tribes has been compared to the likes of Mount Sinai for the Jewish community, right? In scale of importance. Not all sacred places are marked with a steeple. And as the words rang out from Apache leaders last week, yours will be next. What is at stake here is greater and wider and deeper, right? The particularity of Oak Flat in this situation here is representative of a larger struggle to name and protect God's good creation. That was a wonderful song that was shared with us last week, which means whichever way you go, go the good way. I love that. I'm continually baffled by those who audaciously extract from the earth without second thought. To simply say, though, that, this is a apathy versus an empathy problem. And that does exist, right? And that is a way to see it and to frame it and understand it. But that would also be not seeing the deeper threads that are woven in here. What has occurred is a loss of our fundamental right relatedness with God's creation around us. You see, so often, even in the church, maybe sometimes, especially in the church, we speak about creation as if it's created for us, like for our use, or for our consumption, or for our benefit. And for many of us, we've never really questioned that. That's just sort of baked into a lot of the things back when we were little kids of some of those sort of underlying creedal ideals that were just sort of underneath. Because for so long, humans, we believed ourselves to be at the top, right? At the top of the chain, the apex, the ones who the story is all about here. But that's just it, right? That's the mark of our missing. That this is not our story. This is God's story. This drama has never been centered around us, but has always been centered around the Creator. And this is the Creator's story. We are part of the greater salvific drama wrapped up in what it means to be people of a holy God, right? This is God's creation. We are God's people. This is God's story. And we are thankful, and I'm so grateful to be a part of that. But here's the deal. Here's the deal, friends. For those who have ears to hear, that's a posture that is outside God's created order, to think that this is our story, right? It's outside of even what Scripture tells us about our intended relationship with non-human creation. So there's been no shortage of ideals and thoughts around hierarchy that have slipped into our modern ways of understanding creation and our God-given role here. Who's on top, right? Who's in charge? Who is all this for? But these are already the wrong questions. This would be to read the Bible through the lens of business and modernity, right? To attempt to interpret Scripture through ladder climbing and bottom dollar and capitalistic modes of thinking. To be blunt, to do this would lead to missing out on the good news of the gospel and the salvific arc of Scripture completely. First, let's name that there is only one for whom all this is for, right? And that's God, the one, Yahweh, the creator. Creation is not for you. It wasn't created for my glory or for our praise or for our use, but can only be for God. As John Wesley states time and time again, this is all the Lord's, and we are only, as he would say, stewards of it for our time temporarily here. We are, as humanity, part of creation. Not on top of it, but within it. As the Genesis poem reminds us, we are created way down at the end, at the end of day 6. It's almost like an addendum, right? Alongside the cattle and the things that, quote, creep along the earth. We couldn't even get our own day. But this is because creation, as God created it, as God intends it to be, is a web of life. Or we could use the fancy word, an ecosystem. And yes, you and I, humanity has, we believe, a significant role to play as those created in the image of God, as those who are caretakers here. But creation, all of it, it's an ecosystem. All the parts are entangled with all the other parts. Creation, all of it, is an entanglement. Man, I just love that word, by the way. Like, if you just say it right now, wherever you're at, entanglement, say it with me. Entanglement. I love entanglement because I think that's such a good word. There's so much good work happening really around entanglement today. And, it's such a time to be alive when, on one hand, right now, science is uncovering all the ways we are all connected to one another, to all of creation, as the molecules in our body right now, the air we breathe, the water, the food, all these molecules that are in our body that have existed prior to us and will exist after we are no longer here breathing and drinking and eating. These molecules will continue on. These molecules have certainly been within the people and places before us and will be in those who come after us. Science is uncovering just how entangled creation is and how magnificent God's work is. Yet, meanwhile, this uncovering is happening at a time when we are exploiting God's creation like we have never exploited it. Through our postures of overconsumption and waste in ways that the earth has never seen. And so we're in the middle of this great uncovering of knowledge about the entanglement and the magnificence of the smallest parts to the largest parts of creation. Right. I've been listening to some Neil deGrasse Tyson audiobooks. If you're not following that guy, he's an astrophysicist. Man, the bro he's just so good, and he just brings it down to earth, understandably for us regular people. The universe is deep and wide, and we're just scratching the surface. I mean, I just went through a whole chapter about dark matter. Like what can be said, right? It's this, we know it exists, although we don't really know, like we can't see it, but we can see its effects on all the mass around us. Like we wouldn't be here without dark matter. Yet, what is dark matter? And so what science confirms Should we be surprised to find that our Christian theology holds within it and indigenous wisdom has been pointing us to for centuries that everything needs everything else? Your well-being is my well-being. Healthy soil, healthy people. All of it needs all of it. All flourishing is mutual. This, my friends, this is just science, which means this is how God created creation, God's intention for God's good creation. Yet at a time we're uncovering this, we are exploiting creation more than ever. And there's the questions, of course, that begin floating around in our heads as they tend to do, perhaps. And all what's all that dominion talk? And that's one of the things, obviously, when we talk about creation care, we circle back to periodically again and again. What about being created in the image of God? Doesn't that give humans a bit of capital over things? But that's the irony, isn't it? Here's where things get a little more scandalous, if you can believe it, right? We get so caught on this dominion word, this rule over verbiage, and thousands of years in, we have some pretty developed ideas around what we think rulers look like, what we think dominion looks like. But you see, everything we know about how this God has truly revealed God's self to be, what dominion looks like God's dominion, like through the person of Jesus, all that we learn about what ruling is for God, for our God, our Creator, everything we learn about what kind of king Jesus is the servant king. What kind of ruler washes feet and dines with sinners and heals what is broken and even loses his own life in order to redeem us and all creation. And so I think if we're honest, we've kept the servant King Jesus kind of stuck in our frontal lobes pretty often. Like, we don't often let that knowledge seep down and transform our hearts, because if that's really who Jesus is, carrying his cross and calling us to do the same, that can be kind of terrifying, especially for those who have calculated everything we could lose. Some of us fear talk of Jesus being the servant king, because to be a part of God's saving mission for creation may very well mean, probably will mean, losing a way of life that holds our neighbors captive. Are you with me? It will mean losing a way of life that holds creation captive around us. Is there such a thing as loving our neighbor as ourselves? Is there such a thing as this golden rule and upholding that and pillaging God's creation? Is there such a thing as loving your neighbor and decimating God's creation? We are interdependent with the life of the soil, the cleanliness of water, and the flourishing of coral reefs. In fact, a few verses later in Genesis 2:15, we read that the Lord God took the human and put the human in the Garden of Eden to avad and shamar it, right? We've read this before, right? It's usually interpreted as to till or to till and keep, but it's not till, right? Over and over in the Hebrew scriptures, we know and translate avad as to serve. And actually that word avad, it comes twice in the second chapter of Genesis in relation to humanity's presence in the garden. To serve and keep. So, circle full back. Sorry, we just kind of went on a journey. What do we do when the handful of people groups left who actually are the ones that acknowledge this sacred relationship with the land, who are just about the only ones left with ears to hear and eyes to see this special, caring, codependent relationship we're meant to have with creation, right? The last defenders are being still to this day pushed aside in the name of, quote, progress, so that we can have more metal, more copper, right? Under this ridiculous disguise, if you've been keeping track in the news, right? This ridiculous disguise of, quote, critical U.S. security needs, more comfort, more ease, more defense, more technology, more greenwashing is what it really is, right? More saying, oh, this is going to come back and help us be more eco-friendly, or anything that they can say to sell it. I ask you, where are God's people here? Where are the caretakers? Where are those who hold dominion in the image of God? Where is the church? Maybe Oak Flat feels a great distance from you in your life, but I can tell you that this is happening all around us. It's happening right now around me in Tennessee, where they're passing bills around Tennessee wetlands, removing protections so that developers can basically have their way. And we're not thinking about our water table. We're not thinking about the ecosystems. All we're thinking about is the bottom dollar. It's happening through planned obsolescence. In every big box store you shop in Amazon, right? It's happening through our culture's false gods who are named Mammon and more. Are you with me? Which may also be a store in Nocturne Alley. I'm not sure. Mammon and more. It's the worship of money. It's the love of money. And the worship of more, always needing more, always keeping the quarterly arrow pointing up and to the right. For clarity, this is not about well-being. This is not a conversation about having enough, okay? We have enough. Recently, while I was in town, I had the privilege of sharing with a wonderful group of church folks out in Phoenix, and this gentle hand was raised at one point, and this guy asked, he said something like, I hear, or it was once stated to me that as soon as the earth has around 12 billion people, it will become unsustainable, right? Have you heard anything like that? And those kinds of statements always strike me, right? Scarcity is always the seeds the empire uses to manipulate us and ultimately keep us worried, believing that we need to hoard and get more and prepare for and store up and build bigger barns and extract all the copper we can, right, to land grab, because the culture of consumerism, of mammon and more, must keep those kinds of lies circulating, right? I was like, no, I'm not familiar with that stat. That may have been said at some point. I don't know, but I do know how amazingly regenerative the earth is when we give it the chance to flourish. When we offer ourselves up as the servants and keepers of creation, created in the image of God. There's always been more than enough. There's always been more than enough. But here in America, we soared past the enough category a long time ago. And now I can't help but wonder, just like ancient Egypt or Assyria or Babylon, God's creation people have become enslaved through our cultures, our empires' cravings for infinite amounts of more, which in the church world, we have great names for these things, like greed, lust, gluttony, envy, pride, rage, right? Each and every one of these deadly sins rears its ugly head here. Slothfulness, right? Just name it. These are all entangled. These sins rear their ugly heads. Because no, true well-being doesn't occur through extracting more metal from under the ground. What good is more copper without water, without the places we love, without our sacred places and sites of worship, of losing places like Oak Flat is not just about losing land, it's about losing our humanity. It's about losing our soul. The richness of the earth is not in the minerals deep under the ground. It's in the form of mountains and streams and prairies and wildlife. Are you with me? It's about us returning to a posture that is sustainable, that is regenerative, that is good news for all things, the reconciliation of all things. So how can we be a part of something different? I think the temptation is to say, geez, that all feels way too big. Good thing Jesus is coming back soon. But that would be to completely miss what it means to love your neighbor today, wouldn't it? To be on mission with God here on earth today. So, Lord, save us from becoming that servant which was found to be wicked and lazy. The ones who were hoarding wealth, heads in the sand, knowing that you're going to come back soon. I wonder if being a lazy Christian is not about not showing up on a Sunday morning every week, but about being a Christian who only shows up on Sunday morning every week, right? Because being a Christian is about continually showing up. It's what Jesus was what those end chapters of Matthew, that's what they're really trying to say. What does it mean to be ready, alert, and awake? Stepping in the gap, putting on love, as Paul would say, to embody the good news for all people and all creation. So I just wanted to share a little bit about that and about my experience with Oak Flat last week. And so good news, after the vigil and march that we were able to participate in, a federal judge has temporarily blocked Resolution Copper from proceeding with any mining plans until we hear back from the Supreme Court at this point as to whether or not they will actually take up the case for saving Oak Flat. So as of recording the week of May 12th, it's a waiting game and it's a prayer game. And so here's what you can do. You can use your voice. You can share this. You can share these stories and these articles. I'm going to link several things below. Raise the awareness of the importance of this situation. Because this is not just something that's happening out in distant Arizona, right? This is about God's creation. And this is about the kind of posture and the kind of things that we should be about as the people of God. You can donate. Again, there'll be links below for San Carlos Apache Tribe, Apache Stronghold. And we can pray. We can hold space together for Oak Flat and for these places around us all. So, my friends, my hope here has not been to misappropriate anything or any words or any of this music or these wonderful songs and prayers that have been shared to represent faithfully the particular struggle of the people of Apache Stronghold and the keeping and protecting of their sacred land at Oak Flat, and to do the work of framing that within the larger narrative that we are all a part of as humanity in one planet, one people here as a part of planet Earth and God's creation. Love you all. Until next time, grace and peace.